Raina Troy Hotline.
Alicia, Michael, what's going on?
We know you have takes. We have takes.
I'm actually surprised that your rant line, rave line, whatever, isn't completely full.
Why can't we just win a game?
Can I blame Michael Castillo for this?
Can I blame Bob Connolly for this?
Could I put on a zebra shirt and just go out there?
Scratch, claw, up against the wall. Can't explain it what I'm feeling right now, guys. I can't believe it. Let's open up that race line. Woohoo!
Oh, I can't believe USC has hired Lincoln Riley. Oh, yeah.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Rain of Troy Radio. This is episode 481 coming to you on Monday, April 10th. It is the last episode before the spring game coming up on Saturday. Super exciting to finally have that around 12 p.m. on Saturday at the Coliseum, April 15th. Tax Day at the LA Coliseum, of course. We're going to preview the game, talk about what we expect to see, what we wish to see, talk about all of that kind of stuff going into the spring game, along with some basketball news towards the end of the show. As always, you can follow us on social media. We're on Twitter and Facebook, and subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. We are there. Our email address is reignoftroy@fanside.com. I'm your host, Michael Castillo, and you can join us here in our Reign of Troy studio. This is Alicia D'Arzola, my co-host.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. I totally botched that, but we're just going to roll with it because
That's fine.
we're live.
We are.
We're live. And I'm super excited because the spring game is always one of those events that I feel when you talk about the things in the off season, it's one of the big checkpoints, right? It's one of the big things that you look forward to. It's one of the big pillars, one of the big, timestamps.
It's also, it's spring camp is difficult. You can always take things from spring camp and then find out that you were absolutely wrong about your observations.
Yeah.
Whether you are at practice every day watching as much as USC will let you watch it, or whether or not you're just sort of following along at home, the assumptions we make about spring are very difficult to prove because it's all internal.
Mm-hmm.
You sort of have the narratives are set, and then that doesn't mean they translate to what you actually see in games. It's difficult.
Yeah.
But
and
for whatever reason, I always look at the spring game as like the ultimate, like, look at the team. Like, this is going to tell us about the team in a way that I probably overvalue, but my brain doesn't care about the logic on that. My brain thinks this is as close to USC football as you are going to get. This is as close as you've gotten to USC football for 4 months.
Yeah.
And this is as close as you are going to get for another 3 months. So
this
is the end all be all.
5 months.
5 months.
Yeah.
I don't math. That's fine. Whatever. Time is a flat circle, Michael. But yeah, it feels big. It feels meaningful. And even if it's not as meaningful or big as we think it's going to be, every year I get hyped for it. Every year I enjoy it. Every year it's just something fun. And for the people who are going to get to go to the Coliseum, I have always said that, like, even if the action is not good, as it has been in times where it's just a glorified practice, like, just being in the Coliseum is special. It doesn't really matter. You only get so many days of the year that you get to be inside the Coliseum and have there be football. And so for that reason alone, it's big, but also it's football.
Yeah, absolutely. It's football. It's a sample of what's to come. For football, like football itself, you're not going to learn a lot on Saturday in the sense that SC will go vanilla. They will, there's cameras on. The spring games have sort of been really neutralized in the past few years because of that. Like, that has sort of been a thing.
Which is funny because I've seen over the last couple of weeks, I've seen multiple people talk about how it's weird that college football hasn't cashed in on spring games more by having them do actual scrimmages against like D1 to D2 teams.
Yeah.
Or stuff like that. Like have an actual like
It's what I've
exhibition
thought
game.
for years. I've always said that SC and UCLA should play a spring game against each other and put it at one of the MLS stadiums, sell out the thing,
Yeah.
make it like a whole big party together. It would be awesome.
Yeah, it would be really fun. Even if it wasn't like, that's when you should be playing UC Davis.
Sure, yeah,
Like,
or that.
Like that's when you should be playing the FCS schools and give them a kickback, you know, just like when you're scheduling them during the year. But yeah, I think like that would make it very much more interesting. But like you were saying, like that hasn't happened, and that isn't what spring games are at this stage.
Yeah, and part of it is if you're a coach, you want your team to be healthy. Number one, you want and coaches. There is no more there is not a paranoid profession outside of coaches. Like it is the number one chief paranoid profession. Hence why media is really not allowed to see practice, and also why things tend to be sort of vanilla when it comes to spring games. And so a spring game against another opponent, I think would probably require more things like maybe more game planning, but also there's the chance if you're going to go super vanilla, there's the chance you could lose to UC Davis. You know what I mean? Because if you're going to go out there not trying to win the game necessarily, but just trying to get reps and try things, you absolutely, if you played an FCS team, could lose. Another reason not to do it, because that looks bad for recruiting, for narratives, for any of those things. Because look at basketball. That happens every single year. There's a Division 2 or 3 team that comes in. They go into Rupp Arena to play Kentucky, and Podunk Academy or whatever goes and beats Kentucky on an exhibition game in which Kentucky is playing all of their bench dudes and walk-ons, right? Happens every year. And people try to make some big deal about it, and it doesn't mean anything.
Right, but Kentucky's coach doesn't get fired for that.
Yes.
Which is the key here. Right. Because like in the soccer, this is what you do. Your preseason is literally just playing a handful of exhibition games that are all just money grabs, but also just sort of ways to get your guys to go run out and see what they're made of. And yeah, sometimes you lose to FC whatchamacallit in the French 3rd division. But no one gets fired for that. So like the fear that the problem is just like with relegation, just like with all of these good ideas that would apply very well to certain American sports. The problem is that like, because you weren't doing from the beginning, people aren't accustomed to it. People aren't attuned to it. And so it would be too drastic a thing to do all of the sudden. And that's why we just have to dream and talk hypotheticals about the possibility of this making things better.
Right. Well, the other flip side about it is I think if you're a coach, and probably this is the most important thing for coaches, is you want to have the maximum number of reps. And one of the ways you do that is by having a spring game against your own dudes. And so while I think that you would ideally like to have the spring game behind closed doors so you wouldn't have to craft a playbook to be, ready for TV to just be broadcast nationally. You want your offense going up against your defense so that way you can get double the amount of reps. Whereas if you were playing UC Davis, your offense is only out there when the offense is out there. You can't have the offense and the defense out there at the same time.
Yeah.
So either way, Saturday, let's just get right into it. Saturday, April 15th, this Saturday, 12 p.m. At the Coliseum, also on the Pac-12 networks in LA, is the USC spring game, of course. Let's kind of run through some news here. Damani Jackson finally has spoken to reporters for the first time. He spoke to Ryan Young of Rivals about his freshman season and injury recovery. It's a good article that Ryan put together. Go over, check that out on Rivals. But it's a premium article, so I'm not going to read the whole thing. But there is a quote that is in the tweet that says, "It's always a struggle." Says Damani Jackson, just getting that confidence. It plays a big role in your play, and I'm real confident in my knee this year. Lincoln Riley was asked about Damani Jackson on Saturday and said, Quote, we've got to get him settled into a point where he can really turn loose and play aggressive all the time, because when he does that, you see the strength, you see the length, you see the top end speed, and he's learning to use that more aggressively and learning when he can. Each day he gets a little more confident, and the mistakes are starting to trend down. The positive plays are starting to go up, and that's going to be a process.
Yeah, this is the struggle with knee injuries, right? It's people have gotten much, much better at recovering quickly. But for the majority of my, for our growing up years in watching sports, if you tore your ACL, like that was a 50-50 career ender. Like you were never going to come back and be the same player. And so I think that because we've seen what Adrian Peterson did after coming back from how quickly he came back, we're seeing guys come back quicker than ever.
Kyle Schwarber.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that everyone is going to make a full recovery within 6 months or within 9 months.
Right.
Some guys, it is about the confidence of being able to run and make a cut and not have to think about the knee buckling under them every time they go out there. And being able to break through that mental block is half of the battle. And that's not always the kind of thing that comes quickly. Sometimes it takes time. It takes reps. It takes just different milestones that you make. So I always try to give guys who are coming off of a knee injury to not expect them to be full go until at least a year and a half, if not 2 years, out from the injury itself. You got to give them the year to physically recover, and then there's almost like another year of mental recovery. I think it's interesting that he's talking about the knee, the injury issue that way, that he's using the words like confidence, because I think that really is the hurdle to get over. And spring is a really good time to build confidence. That's one of the biggest things that spring can do, and we talked about this before, is confidence in the scheme, knowing what you're supposed to do, knowing what you can do. It's not just knowing what your responsibility on a play is from a playbook perspective. It's about confidence in, I can execute this play at a high level, athletically, physically. So that's big. That's big for Damani Jackson, and hopefully it continues to carry over into the season, because he's too talented. You got to have him on the field. Guys like Damani Jackson, guys like the 5-star studs. You got to get them going. If you won't be successful if your 5 stars are bust. That's just the way it works. And we've seen that in past USC teams. When the 5 stars bust, when you have guys who either are consistently injured or just consistently not performing at the level that you expect them to, it sort of weighs on the team. And those are missed. The gaps in the roster are felt when the 5-star doesn't pan out. Damani Jackson's talented enough to pan out. Just need to get him on the field.
Well, it's been the frustration among SC fans for the last decade, right? Is not getting the 5 stars when you really want the 5 stars, right? And
when you get the Corey
when you
Foreman,
get them,
and then he doesn't, it takes a while. Or the Wole Batikus, or the
when you actually get the guy, you got to actually follow through and be able to get the maximum out of them. It's not just about getting them. And SC has had their fair share of 5 stars that have been 5-star players in college, of course. But it's about getting the most out of them, and we'll see what Damani Jackson can do later on this season. Super exciting for SC to have him back and be healthy and ready to go for a full season. Sticking to the defense, Rajon Davis, a guy that you've called for a lot at linebacker, had a scoop and score in Saturday's scrimmage. That seems to be a good thing. He's also gold-plated along with Anthony Lucas. And Anthony Lucas is on my list of things that I want to see in the spring game, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes. But per Lincoln Riley, he's one of the first players to be gold-plated this year. And quote, this is about Lucas. He's done a good job. He's really, I've really been impressed since he's a younger guy to transfer in. He's learned our stuff. He's been a very reliable guy from a scheme standpoint. He makes explosive plays, brought good energy and competitiveness to each day. He's really acclimated well to the defense. and he's been a really fun guy to have in the program. He's been a fun guy to put in our defense. And yeah, just this transition, you never know how that transition is going to go, especially with a younger guy that's still not as seasoned as of a college football player, and he's handled it very well. So now I've been super impressed. He's got a really, really high upside, and he's one of those guys you feel his impact in practice just about every day. I know it's spring, and I know you're going to hear positive things about every player. You're not going to hear a coach say, you know what, I just really don't like what he's doing out there. But
this guy actually sucks.
Yeah, you're never going to hear that. But at the same time, this bodes well, right? Like, Anthony Lucas is the guy you bring in on defense along with, Mason Cobb in terms of transfers to be impact players. And if he can be that impact player immediately in year one, that would be huge.
I think there's a very clear argument that Anthony Lucas is the most talented player that USC has had transfer, aside from the obvious Caleb Williams.
Yeah.
His ceiling is that high. Now, that was his ceiling coming in as a recruit, and I think his time at A&M, he clearly wasn't. He didn't feel like that was the right fit for him as far as school, so he decided to transfer quickly out of A&M. And now it's USC's job to take that immense talent that he has and turn it into production, to productivity. And so, yeah, I agree with you that it is nice to hear Lincoln Riley say these things, to have positive reports about him. Not just that this guy's really talented, but this guy's bringing the competitiveness and the energy and the that all of the, like, those kinds of things matter to me as much as talent. I think that you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't have a motor, then what's it going to do? If you don't have the will to succeed, what's it going to do? If you're not a team player, what's it going to do? And those are the kinds of things that you want to see. For those at home who need the reminder, because it had slipped my mind going into spring too, the gold plating process is the process of getting the Trojan, the sticker decal on your helmet.
Yeah.
So in the spring, everyone has to earn the right to wear that decal on their helmet, and that's called getting gold plated. And you earn that by meeting the standards that the coaches set. It's not like the Buckeyes, where you get a sticker because you get X many sacks or X many tackles or whatever. It's, are you meeting expectations in the weight room? Are you on time to meetings? Are you setting a good example in the classroom? All of those character things are going into gold plating. For a transfer to come in and be one of the first guys to be gold plated while he is adjusting to life in a new location, also a young guy, by the way, this isn't like a veteran transfer who's been somewhere for 4 years and just sort of knows what's what, and you walk in the door. This is a guy who's still getting used to the college atmosphere in the first place. For him to get gold plated that early is a very, very good sign. So I will absolutely take these comments and run with them. Yes.
Yeah. And, Ohio State does have a very similar thing to this, and it's earning the red stripe. You earn your, at first, their Ohio State helmet when you first start a season is just
black.
It's like black and silver stripes.
Yeah.
And then you earn your red stripe to go down the middle. And then as the games go on, you earn the Buckeyes, as the season goes on for academic and on-field things. But I agree with everything you're saying. And I think that this is part of the necessary improvement for USC on defense. It starts with the sort of building blocks like you see. And yeah, a lot of this is just, springtime wins, which are, we only hear about springtime wins. We don't hear about springtime losses, but it's a big deal. I think it's a big deal to at least begin, especially when you look at where SC was defensively at the end of the year, which was completely in the basement, and SC's got to find a way out of there. And getting somebody in like Anthony Lucas and having him, really be a strong player this spring is huge. And we'll see what that means on Saturday and how the fans can sort of see his impact as well. Lincoln Riley was talking about the defensive improvement on Saturday after this past Saturday's scrimmage, and he said, quote, defensively, last year there was a little bit of sense that you had your handful of really good players, and then there was too much of a gap between those guys and everybody else. Whereas now you've got some really outstanding individual players, but the gap is closed, and that's because they have more competition and more depth. We talk a lot about spring quotes are just spring quotes, but there's some teeth in this, is there not? Like this is sort of the thing that we had talked about all last year. That there it was one of the things, like, what is the problem with SC on defense? Is it schematics? Is it the players? The players just not good? And the reality is, like, it was a little bit of everything, right? Like, it was the coaching, it was the scheme, it was the lack of effort, it was the the players, the roster just not being there. Apart from the top end guys like Thule and Mekhi Blackman. And for Lincoln Riley to just flat out say this to the media, and this being quoted on USCTrojans.com, I think is pretty damning and refreshing at the same time.
Damning and refreshing is absolutely the two words that I use here, but damning is doing a lot of work in a lot of different directions.
Yes.
It's refreshing for Riley to just straight up, essentially say that, like, yeah, the talent wasn't good enough last year, but they've been saying that with their actions the entire time. And the further we've gotten along, the more clear it is to me that, like, the coaching staff didn't believe in the defense at all, which is why I think that the damning term applies both ways. It's damning on the players that USC had on defense last year.
Yeah.
Who you and I think we can all agree there were players out there who were not performing at a level that warrants being in a USC uniform.
But some of those players are still on the team now.
Yes.
That, just because they were on the team last year doesn't mean that they're gone.
That's why, it was an episode or two ago I talked about, like, how confidence is this big thing, right? And the defense that we saw out there against Tulane was not a confident defense. That defense, it looked like guys didn't trust what they were doing. And if you have to ask, where does that lack of trust come from? I think we have our answer. The lack of trust comes from the coaches thought the defense was trash. And maybe they were right, and it certainly felt like they were right at times. Were they as right as they seemed to think they were? I don't know. I think that maybe a little bit more trust and confidence in players who maybe weren't good enough athletically or whatever it was. Like, maybe they could have gotten better results if they had sort of come down to their level and sort of worked with them in a sense, then things would have turned out better. But I will also give some room here for maybe the tough love approach is the approach on D. Like, maybe cleaning house and saying, you know what, that the players on that team weren't good enough, and a lot of them have been processed out. And if you're still here, that's because we think there's something to you, and that building more confidence and that sort of being part of the growth of this defensive unit, that could ultimately be a good thing. Like, there's certainly room for that. There's just as much room for all of this negativity around the defense. Like, at a certain point, if you're saying that the players weren't good enough and you recruit in better players and you don't get better results, then who's not good enough? Like, there's a push and pull to this, which is why damning works so well, because it really is one side or the other, but it's ultimately going to apply to the whole shebang, right? So these quotes say a lot to me, and part of me is really excited by that. Part of me is like, they get it. They're going to hold a higher standard. They're going to recruit at a higher standard. They're going to demand excellence, and that will yield results.
Yeah.
And the other part of me that's been watching a lot of Ted Lasso is sitting here going, like, yeah, but, like, also belief is important, and belief in your players, and and building levels of trust so that when the wheels start to wiggle a little bit, they don't completely fall off the way that they did in 2022.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So West Texas Mike in the chat says I refuse to fall for spring quotes, and I'm sort of
That's fair.
I'm always in that same boat, which is why I think that when we talk about these things, we try to clarify as usually a coach talking about a player is because there's been a question asked about those guys, and the quotes to really I think stand out is when a coach talking about someone sort of unprompted.
Yes.
And it's hard to see what those things are unless you literally watch the press conference back or whatnot. But one of the things that about the statement and talking about the defense is part of it is easy to say now, and it's also bordering on throwing the players under the bus, and that is not something that you want to do. Having said that, I think that this is a little bit different than just straight out like coming out after a loss and saying, the players just didn't execute our game plan and it was the players' fault. Because he's talking about like, the gap is closed because they have more competition and more depth. The reality is, why do they have more competition and more depth? It's because Riley is sort of like gotten more players. And when you
Yeah.
get more players, that's just the reality of it. And that's going to help out everybody. And so I think it would be one thing if it said, if he's like, yeah, that last year there was a talent gap. But this year we don't because we have new players. And yes, he's saying that, and maybe this is semantics, but it's not about the new players. He's saying it's about what the new players mean is the competition, not just that we've replaced those guys, which I think is the important part because you can't just throw everybody to the curb. Obviously, guys who are not up to snuff, you can, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, and get them in the transfer portal. But at the same time, you need to be able to salvage those guys, salvage their development, salvage their careers, get back their confidence, develop them, all those things. If you bring a player on campus, it's then on the coach to get the most out of them. And so all these words are lip service now. They might sound good right now, and I think they do sound good. But yeah, it's going to be on how do you do these things going forward? How do you validate that that's what it is, right? That's one of those things where you actually taken the step forward. So let's get to our spring game wish list. We've put together a wish list of 5 things we each want to see in the spring game this year. Alicia, what is your number one thing?
Encouraging linebacker play. Specifically, I want to see Mason Cobb and I want to see Tackett Curtis, and I want to feel like I'm noticing them for good reasons. Like, I want there to be plays where I think to myself, the linebacker made a good play there, which maybe happened like 5 times all of last year.
Yeah.
So, or at least 5 times when it wasn't Eric Gentry in the first 6 weeks of the season. So, yes, I think that my eyes will be trying to find Mason Cobb and Tackett Curtis and seeing what I see from them. But along with the entire linebacker, it doesn't have to be those 2 guys. I just need somebody in the linebacker group to stand out in a positive way, because if USC is going to succeed in 2023 on defense, he needs to have the linebackers need to have more of an impact in general.
Yeah, 100%. I think that was the issue all year last year. We talked about how the linebacker play was the problem. There were signs on the defensive line that you could have strong play. Tuli like led the nation in sacks, and he was up there with tackles for loss and all those things, right? And in the secondary, you had really strong performances. When you look at Mekhi Blackman, was arguably one of the best shutdown corners in the conference, right? Like there were strong performances at every level, but at linebacker for SC. And linebacker is where you sort of needed those guys, and you saw it from flashes from Eric Gentry. You saw flashes a little bit from the other guys.
There were a couple. I remember like a couple specific moments where Shane Lee made a run stop that was like, okay, that dude ran into a brick wall, and Shane Lee was the brick wall, and that's good to see. But like that happened. I wouldn't need two hands to count the number of times that happened.
Yeah,
with
exactly.
any player on USC's defense.
Yeah. So your first wish list is to sort of see an impact and encouraging play from the linebacker. My first wish list is a turnover. Show me a turnover.
You got to see that turnover luck.
I know. It doesn't have to be, something crazy. I have very low expectations for a spring game itself.
Yeah.
Based on, I think that these things can sort of be, manufactured and kind of vanilla based on the play calling and all that kind of stuff. But a turnover. Show me one turnover. Show me one guy going and making a play on defense, which I think is sort of in line with what you're talking about. But yeah, show me a turnover. What's your number 2?
My number 2 is going back to something we already talked about, Damani Jackson.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what the quotes are telling us. I want to see that he is actually going to be factoring in. You could throw Corey Foreman in there as well, in terms of the sort of just, we've heard about them gaining confidence, growing this spring. We have heard it. I want to see it. That's something that, would be nice.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you got to replace Mekhi Blackman. I feel like I've mentioned Mekhi Blackman like 18 times on this episode already, and he's no longer at SC. He's planning for the NFL draft, so SC's got to find a way to replace him at corner. And Damani Jackson certainly would be a perfect plug and play as a 5-star recruit coming out of Mater Dei last year. My number 2 is just straight up Anthony Lucas. I let me see the Lucas. Let me see what he can do.
Similar. We've seen the talk. Now let's see the walk.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's my number 2. We've talked about him at length at this point.
Yeah.
He's got length. He's a big dude on the defensive line. What can he do? I want to see.
Yeah.
What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Zach Branch. Heard a lot more. We've heard a lot. I want to see it. I just think every time Zach Branch's name comes up, people who are at practice, people who are sort of in the program, rave about this kid, that he looks the part already, that he looks like a college wide receiver, that he's a day one impact guy. And I know what that looks like because I watched Robert Woods, and we watched, the Juju Smith-Schusters of the world who sort of like took on that role immediately. I want to see if Zach Branch passes my eye test in the spring game.
Yeah, I'm going to go to one of mine here that I think that's similar to this, which is Malachi Nelson. You talked about, you've seen Robert Woods, you've seen Juju Smith-Schuster, you've seen those guys. We've seen a lot of wide receivers come through SC in the past 20 years, right? But that's also can be kind of said for the quarterbacks. We know what like Mark Sanchez as a true freshman in 2005 threw a bunch of touchdowns in a scrimmage. We've seen what Ricky Town looked like early on. We've seen what all those guys, Slovis, looked like early on. We've seen what Darnold looked like early on, Fink, Kessler, Weddick, etc. I want to see what Malachi Nelson looks like after a spring.
Yeah.
Just to see where he is. No pressure. I think that this has been a nice kind of opportunity for him to just have no pressure, and this season to have zero pressure. Coming in for Caleb Williams, behind Caleb Williams. Obviously, if there's a time where he's got to come in October in a key game on the road or whatever, and suddenly you throw him out there against Notre Dame because Caleb Williams rolls his ankle or something, knock on wood that doesn't happen, but obviously there'd be a lot of pressure on him, right? But it's nice that SC doesn't throw him into a situation where they need him week 0 to go out and win a game. Presumably. as it stands right now. And this gives him the opportunity to just grow at a natural pace. And I want to see what that looks like right now.
Yeah, and I think the important thing there is that what we see on Saturday isn't a reflection of what he will be as a starting quarterback. But like you said, it's where in his journey is he? How far progressed is he?
Mm-hmm.
Can we start to think about him being the backup? Or is it more realistic to sit back and say, you know what? No, Miller Moss will remain the backup this year. Malachi Nelson will compete for the starting job next year, and let him have a year to just get his feet underneath him. I think that's a real question. And it's certainly, given, the history of Lincoln Riley quarterbacks, I think it's certainly an interesting sort of exercise to see, because Caleb was ready very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And he certainly wasn't the finished article as a freshman, but he was capable of starting a football game as a freshman. And even the guy like Spencer Radler it didn't take him that long to get to a point where he could start a football game and not be a liability.
None of those guys, with the exception of Caleb Williams, played as a true freshman.
Yeah, because they didn't need to.
Yeah.
And that's
Caleb was the only one that sort of needed to, but even then he didn't need to.
Kind of
that was by decision. Yeah.
That the impressive thing about Caleb is he forced the issue. Is that he wasn't needed. He was he was worth it.
And I'm going to go out on a limb and say that Malachi Nelson is not going to force the issue.
No. Caleb and Spencer Radler are a very different situation with the two. So
yeah,
I don't know that I'd go that far, but you never know. Like, in a season, Malachi Nelson is competing with Miller Moss, and that's the other thing, that we're going to get a look at Miller Moss this year, the spring game, and we might see something from Miller Moss that shows that he has taken a progression forward, to suggest that, you know what, not only is he the backup to Caleb, but like, if Caleb pulled a hamstring in the first quarter of a very important football game and was hobbling around on one leg, maybe this time Miller Moss would be trusted to come in the game and go out and win it, instead of, we can't win this game unless a one-legged Caleb Williams does it for us. Like, there's levels of trust that are there, that are in question there too, that maybe we get to see something about.
Yeah, and also this is a year in which we might see the old difference between a long and short-term backup.
Yes.
So that might be a thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're going to have to see how that all comes to be, because we know we've talked about that before with like Matt Fink and whatnot back in the day. What's your number 4? Number 4 thing that's on your wish list to see in the spring game?
Tight ends, baby.
Yes.
I don't know what I'm looking for, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
Carson Tabaracci made the move to tight end, so maybe he's somebody I'll be looking at and seeing, is this a real move, or is this a body? The unit is thin, so I don't know that we're going to see a lot from them, but I do think it's worth looking at, because if the plan is to get Deuce Robinson involved, whether they call him a wide receiver or a tight end, like, I think we could maybe glean some things from Lake McCree or from other guys who are going out there and playing the position. So yeah, I'm looking for tight ends.
Yeah, and on a related note to there, I'm going to say running backs. I want to do the running backs. This is a running back rotation that's going to look a lot different than it did last year, even though there's going to be a lot of the same guys. Yeah. Austin Jones is back. Raleek Brown is back. Darren Barlow is back. Travis Dye is not, but in comes a transfer in Marshawn Lloyd out of South Carolina, and you got 2 early enrollees in Quentin Joyner and Amarion Peterson, and there's a lot of dudes there. There's just like the receiving core, you've got a lot of guys that sort of want to eat. How are you going to mix and match everybody? We've talked about Raleek Brown, that he has the versatility to be featured as a receiver. There's questions in the chat about special teams. Yeah, maybe Raleek Brown gets more special teams opportunities and is able to eat that way. I don't know. We're gonna all see, but I'd like to see where the running backs are this spring on Saturday.
Yeah, I almost put Marshawn Lloyd in my list. I just didn't want to be redundant.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that there's every chance that this is just Austin Jones's job, and he's USC's bell cow, and
For a lot of last year, SC went with the one running back.
Yeah,
rotation.
It's entirely possible that's what we're going to see.
Yeah.
But you didn't bring in Marshawn Lloyd to sit on the bench.
Yeah.
And I don't think Marshawn Lloyd came to USC to sit on the bench. I think he intends to be I feel like Marshawn Lloyd came to USC to be an all Pac-12 first team level player.
Mm-hmm.
If not, obviously all of these guys want to be all Americans, but like, it's not always super viable. But like, I think that when you're looking at Marshawn Lloyd, like his aspirations should be that. And I'm curious if he'll be able to live up to that. We'll have to see. I don't know that we're going to necessarily see the whole array of how USC will be using the running backs in this game, but it's still good to see them get a few carries and see what they can do.
Yeah, and there's new faces. I want to see what the new faces look like. Yeah. I want to see their stride. I want to see how they cuts, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Last thing, what are you looking for? What's your number 5 on your wish list?
The wide receiver pecking order.
Do you expect an answer with that?
Not necessarily, but I expect a little bit more clarity from where I'm at now, which is like, Mario Williams is theoretically wide receiver number 1, but is he? Because Dorian Singer might be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you and I both like Taj Washington a lot. I think he's probably the most underrated player for USC coming in this season.
You want a sneaky bet?
I mean, is he wide receiver number 2? Is he wide receiver number 1? I don't know.
I feel like I might have said this before, but like I would not be shocked if Taj like just had the most catches.
Yes, because here's how it would go. Wide receiver number 1 changes every game, but wide receiver number 2 stays consistent. And Taj Washington is your second option in every single game. Mm-hmm. And so he ends up with more consistent production, ends up with more production in general. Whereas like I can see Dorian Singer and Brendan Rice and Mario Williams and, you know, name one of the other wide receivers to come in and have their show off game that changes week to week.
Taj is the Deontay Burnett of this receiving core.
Yes. But that's the other thing is like Brendan Rice, we saw him be a star. Is he a star? I love a lot of the other wide receivers in this group, like Michael Jackson. Is there room for him to be the guy? Where does Zach Branch fit?
Yeah.
You know, there are some real questions in this wide receiver room. Kyron Hudson, who I really like a lot as well. Do those guys have a future with USC in this setup? I think it's possible. I think there's, to me, what we've seen from a guy like Michael Jackson and in flashes Kyron Hudson, like there's no reason to believe they couldn't be a starter for USC. But a lot of that depends on like, is Brendan Rice a bona fide starter? Because that's the thing that sort of makes it all a little bit wonky. There's only so many spots here, and you and I are fairly certain that Singer, Williams, and Washington are 3 of 4.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to pencil in Brendan Rice as 4 of 4. But is it? Because we saw him be a star, but we also saw him.
But there's Zach Branch, and how do you not have Zach Branch?
How do you not have Zach Branch in there? Where do you find room for Michael Jackson, Kyron Hudson, and you know?
I love watching Michael Jackson III. I think he's awesome.
He makes me happy. Like I see the number 9 on the field, and it's not just because I have flashbacks to all the great number 9s who have caught passes for USC recently, but like. You know, good things are going to happen when the ball.
You watch his highlights and you're like, "That's a pretty young thing."
Yeah. Yes. PYT. Exactly.
Yeah. All right. My number 5 is alongside the wide receivers is just Dorian Singer. I want to give me one Dorian Singer highlight. I don't care what it is. Just one thing. Scratch the itch.
I'm exactly with you. Yes.
Yeah. Well,
Dorian Singer was absolutely incredible against USC, and I can't say that I watched too much else of Arizona, but
I sort of feel bad. I feel like he put the expectations so high by having one Buffo game against SC to the point like now everyone is expecting every single catch of his to be one-handed. And it's not going to be the same as Katie Nixon beating up on SC at Colorado and then come in and doing literally nothing. So I don't expect that at all. But I do think that there might be a moment where, like, Dorian Singer, we all expect him to just be this superstar, and I think he will be. But it also sucks that, like, the expectations are, if he's not doing these one-handed crazy things that you might not think he is, but he should be, right?
Yeah, I feel you.
Yeah. All right, let's go to basketball before we go into the mailbag. And if you're joining us here live on YouTube, be sure to stock up the chat with questions, and we'll wrap up the show by running through your comments there. Let's go to some basketball news. USC currently is the favorite to get a commitment from Bronny James. No relation to Boney James. Relation to LeBron James. The kid from Akron. Bronny James deciding between Ohio State and USC. And apparently the Trojans are the leader for James, who could decide at any moment. On3 put out a recruiting prediction machine, their version of the crystal ball from 24/7, I guess, that says SC has the 72.3% chance of landing him over Ohio State at 27.5. And then 0.2% potentially going anywhere else. Alicia, he's 6'3", 190 pounds, out of Sierra Canyon, 4-star combo guard, the 33 ranked recruit in the 24/7 Sports Composite. So he is not just... He's not, LiAngelo Ball, who's just, like, there because of his famous name. He actually is a highly ranked recruit. What would this mean for SC, and what are your thoughts?
This would be a pretty huge get. Name recognition obviously is big. One of the things that USC basketball is always fighting against the tide on is relevancy relative to UCLA, and having LeBron James's son at your school, it's a touch of relevancy. LeBron wouldn't let his kid go to any random place. Like, that's it. It's a mark in the column for USC basketball. And then also, like, I think he's such an interesting prospect. I almost wish he wasn't LeBron James's son.
Yeah,
I think it messes with, like, what he could be, because there will be this pressure to go to the NBA, and LeBron has said he wants to play with Bronny, and LeBron's getting old, and the time, like, the clock is ticking on that.
This to me is slightly the red flag.
Yes, because
it doesn't seem fair to Bronny to me.
I feel like Bronny is not a one and done player who will be a one and done player for the sake of playing with his dad. Bronny feels to me like a really interesting prospect who's a little bit cerebral, who, if he had a couple years in college, could really carve out his own name and do something interesting. And I don't know that he's gonna. I mean, I don't know. I think that the family dynamics there aren't. LeBron also isn't like a helicopter parent, to my understanding. So I think it would, maybe this could go in a different way than my brain is putting us towards. But he's an interesting talent because early in his high school career, there was a lot of talk about how he's overrated because he's LeBron James's son. And I think he got a little underrated because he's LeBron James's son. And there was, like, a backlash to, like, Bronny's not an elite basketball prospect.
Right.
And then over the last, like, year or so, he's had some performances at the high school level and sort of these club circuits and stuff like that that make you think, like, no, actually he's got something about him. He's got a touch of that, like I said, cerebral nature on the basketball court that could make him special in a way that his dad is special, and he's never going to reach that level. But that doesn't mean he couldn't do some interesting things on the basketball court. So yeah, I think he'd be a really interesting prospect to add. Really positive step for the basketball program. And I'd love to see it, because I think you'd get butts in the seats too if you got Bronny James at the Galen Center.
Yes. But I'm torn about that. I want SC basketball to be a series. So this is where I'm torn. One, I think if Bronny James was not named Bronny James, we'd be talking about about how incredible this is for all of his basketball acumen. I think that, like you said, I think that there's a seriously good basketball player in here.
We'd be excited about USC basketball getting the 33rd ranked player in any basketball class.
Yes.
Yeah.
However, there's also the jaded SC basketball watcher who looks at this and is like, why do you always got to get the kids? Why do you always got to get the Hall of Famer's son? Why do you got to go get Little Romeo? Why do you?
Hey, Little Romeo worked out in the sense that DeMar DeRozan was legit.
I know, but it's at some point you want SC to get these guys strictly on basketball merit.
Yeah.
Rather than just carrying the banner for University of Spoiled Children, just allowing that to exist. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I don't want to be the cynic here, because I think he could be a good basketball player, and not that I'm a basketball expert in the slightest, certainly not. But when you sign the number one player in Isaiah Collier, and you have Boogie Ellis coming back, a first team All Pac-12 guard, the pieces are there to be a damn good basketball team. And the nation's 33rd ranked recruits absolutely helps that, regardless of what his name is. And I'm always someone who thinks that people should not be judged for what their parents are, or do, or say. And I don't think it's fair. I don't think it's fair to Bronny James to have those preconceived notions. So there's part of me that's like, I shouldn't even be saying any of this stuff because it's not fair to him, right? But the reality is that that's just going to be a narrative that's going to constantly exist there. So
yes, but when you're in the position that USC basketball is in, the narrative, any narratives are good. Is any PR is good PR kind of mentality?
Yes, but you know what's good USC, PR? Making the tournament not being a fringe bubble team.
Okay,
every year.
Well, I mean, you know what
I mean?
You don't need to get me started on anything.
I know,
I have held my tongue about okay, I'm just gonna do it. Boogie Ellis is coming back. Isaiah Collier is coming. Looks like Bronny James is coming. USC's roster for next year is stacked.
If you're not a 4-seed or better,
then what even is the point? If you can recruit Isaiah
sure.
Collier and you have last year's number one player in I'm not gonna butcher his name. I stumble over every time. What's the point of existing as a basketball program? Why? What are we even doing if you can't turn this into something? It's good for the program, the health of the program, to be recruiting the way you're recruiting. It's good for the health of the program if you have Bronny James and you are the source of headlines where people are paying attention to USC.
100%.
I saw a tweet the other day talking about how UConn has more national titles than there was a list of schools combined. And just the fact that USC was on that list, made me giggle, because I was like, you're putting Indiana and Texas and some teams that have and Florida and teams that have actually done something this century, let alone the last 2 centuries. And you're putting USC on there. That's actually kind of a good sign, even if USC basketball doesn't have a title. I'll take it, kind of thing. Just to get mentioned in a category, even if it's to be dunked on, whatever. But you got to turn that into something.
Well,
that's my thing. This is all very good, but trust me, I'm not going to be sitting here carrying Andy Enfield's water next year. I'm just saying.
So Ula in the chat says, you guys don't know basketball, which is very accurate.
We don't
the most accurate
to know basketball.
thing of all time. 100%.
I watch basketball and I get frustrated half the time.
1,000%.
I don't pretend to be an expert
Neither
on
of us
any
do.
of this.
Certainly not. But it also says this is the golden era for USC basketball. 2 things here. One, I don't disagree.
Yes.
It is. In terms of consistency.
Modern USC basketball. Golden era of modern USC basketball.
In terms of SC winning 20 games on a yearly basis, absolutely it is.
Tex Winter would like a word.
But also, the golden era of SC basketball is being a bubble team every year? Like, is that what is?
Yes.
Is that what you want SC basketball to be?
Thank you. That's my whole point.
Like, I understand it is the golden era
There's,
of SC basketball, but
Yeah.
it also it's like saying it's like never having you've never been given the nectar of the gods, a Diet Pepsi. You've only ever had Diet Right. And you're drinking a Diet Right, and someone says, well, that's the best diet soda you've ever had. It might be. It's still not a Diet Pepsi. So what are we doing?
That's all I'm saying. To me, USC is a Power 5 brand across all athletics. We have had this conversation about baseball too. Like, what the heck is USC baseball been doing over the last 2 decades where they've accepted being this nothing program? Like,
Right.
We should have been up in arms about USC baseball sucking the way it's the way it's been sucking.
There should never been a world in which Gillespie was able to get away.
Was able, yes.
And then go and build UCI into taking them to the College World Series.
Yes, that is a travesty.
Yes.
And I think that when you look at USC basketball, you're just talking about you're talking about setting a level. And Andy Enfield has been at USC for a decade. That's my only thing. This isn't like he's been here for 2 years. Let him see what he's going to do. He's been here for 3 or 4 years. Let him see what he's going to do. Like, he's been at USC for 10 years and he's made incredible strides.
Mm-hmm. But you can't be the number 11 seed.
10 years
forever.
in, 10 years in, when you've been recruiting extremely well from day one, essentially.
Yeah.
You can't consistently be the 11 seed.
Yeah. And Tim says, before my time, I think the Bob Boyd teams might have been better. But only one team could go from the pack. And those were the Baby Blues and that wooden guy across town. Yeah. This is the other thing too, is yes, SC has more, tournament trips under Enfield of late versus other eras and all that. Yes, it's all true. But this is also not a level playing field, because this is a game in which, the 1975 Trojans lost 2 games or whatever it was, both of them to UCLA, and they didn't make the tournament. Like,
I mean, when the tournament wasn't 68 teams,
right.
It's a little bit different.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe I just want to see USC basketball like win the Pac-12 once.
Yeah.
Win a Pac-12 tournament once. I mean, that's all I'm saying.
That's the other thing. Yeah. Win
the problem
win
with
a Pac-12 tournament.
The problem with Andy Enfield is he's been just good enough that, like, me wanting more gets a lot of pushback. Like,
yeah,
and it's fair pushback.
But
this
is the irony.
Yeah.
Like, this is the best SC has had, but also
this is the best SC has had.
But you can also want more.
And like Ulao is saying in the chat, like, they still can't sell out the Galen Center. Like, if this is the best USC has had, and they still can't sell out the Galen Center,
right?
Then
it's an indictment. Yeah.
What's going on? Something's going on. And maybe it is a fan problem. Maybe it is an investment problem. Maybe it is anything. Like,
hey, going to the Big Ten can only help.
The money that you get in the TV deal, can, I don't know. Maybe Andy Enfield needs more. I mean, I don't know. Andy Enfield's assistants are all very highly thought of, so I don't know. Maybe
do I need to be pressing this?
Pessimistic Alicia is out in full force.
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah. All right, let's go to the mailbag.
All right,
you've got mail.
All right, we asked you guys what you guys are looking forward to in the spring game. Samuel says excited to see how the freshmen play. It's good call. Tim says excited to see Caleb back on 2 legs.
Yeah. Yeah.
Strong, agree. Marksman says looking forward to seeing the defense. We know the offense will look great. Rama Murdy says this won't tell us much about the team, but it will be fun. Yeah. And Alex says definitely need to give the backup quarterback reps. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I don't expect to see a ton of Caleb Williams in the spring game, to be honest. I think we'll see a lot of Miller Moss and Malachi Nelson.
You want this is going to sound terrible? Like, if you just wrote this out in a quote, I don't care what Caleb Williams does in the game on Saturday.
No.
I don't care if he takes a snap.
Yeah.
You don't need to see him. We know what he is. We know what his game is. We know how good he is. You can wrap him in bubble wrap for all I care.
Yeah.
Allow him to be ready for the season. The spring is not about him, and that is a great position to be in. A excellent position to be in, that the spring is not about him.
Yes.
So, it's about other areas. Josh says, after the previous recruiting stint, what are some holes that are still going to be spots of weakness going into fall camp?
Spots of weakness is tough because I don't think that this team after the transfer portal has a ton of obvious weaknesses. I think it has a ton of question markings.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you reloaded your defensive line. You got Anthony Lucas, you got Keon Bars, you've got Jack Sullivan, you've got Romello Height back, Jamil Muhammad. Like, your front seven, Mason Cobb, you've added a bunch of dudes. But are they actually dudes? Like, that's the bigger question. So, like, that by the time we get to October, we could be talking about how defensive line is a huge recruiting gap because those guys didn't work out. We could be talking about corner as, I hope this isn't the case because I think USC's recruited at corner very well. And if the corners aren't working out, then that's, to me, not the one position on this team that you can't tell me, like, we're lacking talent is corner. You can't say that. That's absolutely false. It is stacked with talent. It's, are you getting what you need out of those guys? So, like, those are questions. I think that you obviously need to continue to recruit very highly on the offensive and defensive lines, no matter what recruiting class you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess my answer would be that, like, no matter what, every team,
Yeah.
no matter how well they've recruited every position, every team every year needs to be thinking about how do we make our defensive and offensive lines as strong as possible.
I think it's linebacker for me because you bring in Tackett Curtis, but also SC still had to go out and get transfer linebackers. And ideally, as much as you want to take advantage of the transfer portal and be the transfer portal team, certainly, you also don't want to be in a position to where you have to do that and be put in a position to where if you don't do that, you are going backwards. And that's the position that SC's been in.
That's the other thing, too, is like Mason Cobb is a stand-in. He's not a long-term solution for USC at linebacker. What USC probably needs is what was the class with the 4 linebacker?
2014.
2014. You need that
Gustin,
kind of
Houston, Osa Messina, who was immediately gone and for good reason.
Yes.
And
Cam Smith.
Yeah. Cam Smith was the one with the least ballyhooed of the 4, and he had the best career.
Yes, but you need, that group didn't work out quite as well as USC hoped, but you need a group like that in the sense of it wasn't the recruiting that let USC down there. Like, those were some dudes, and one of them made terrible life choices.
Yeah.
One of them was hampered by injury for much of his career, and one of them just turned out to be a little bit undersized. Like,
I would say that John Houston, I don't know that he had a completely clean bill of health either. I think towards the end of his career too.
He had a back injury too, if I remember correctly.
But Gustin especially did not have a full bill of health.
Yeah.
Gustin
made his impact when he was on the field. Like, it's not like Gustin was a bust. Gustin was a dog when he was on the field. So you need something like that where you load up. But the biggest thing there in that class is Gustin was your pass rusher, and he was effective when he was on the field, and it just sucked that he wasn't on the field as often.
Yeah.
And Cam Smith was your middle linebacker for 4 years.
I think this team could use a Cam Smith, a guy who is not necessarily a flashy superstar, but just makes every play that you need him to make.
I mean, if you could give me like a Hayes Pollard, I would tell me that USC has signed Hayes Pollard.
Just don't have him defend Hail Marys.
Even with that Hail Mary defense, like, having the difference between USC's defense when they had a string where they had a Hayes Pollard and then they brought in the Cam Smith and they just had that linebacker 4-year starter sort of like established dude versus what they've had in more recent years where it's like, The difference is palpable. So yes, I think that's what you are looking. I think linebacker is a good pull.
Yeah. Marksman says, do you think Zach Branch will take over all the kick return duties this season like Adoree did? See, this is tough because we go back to what we were talking about with the running backs and how there's so many guys that you might need to find creative ways for Malik Brown to get the ball. I think you need to do that for Zach Branch, but you also might need to do that for Michael Jackson III, Kyron Hudson. Mario Williams might still want to get more opportunities there. Like, I think the special teams is going to be an option to get somebody more reps. I don't know for sure that it could be Zach Branch, but it certainly could be. Could be anybody.
I wouldn't say no to Zach Branch. I still think that the game you're playing with Malik Brown is maximizing his touches in every possible way.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that right now I'm looking at Zach Branch and thinking we need to maximize the number of touches that guy has outside of his primary position. I think you look at Malik Brown and you think, how many touches can you get him as a running back? How many touches can you get him as a sort of slot guy, if you want to put it just, or as a receiver? And how many touches can you get him on special teams? Like, I think that's where I would prioritize. And I wouldn't put Zach Branch in front of Malik Brown if we're talking special teams pecking orders.
Yeah. I do like the idea of letting the young guy maybe get the opportunity as the special teamer.
Yes.
To augment their chance of maybe not being one of the top rotation dudes at receiver, but Branch could just end up being one of those guys anyways.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Walter says, why do you think that Nelson is going to play? His body is not even college ready. Nelson is going to redshirt this year. I think
be the plan.
That 100% should be the plan.
The only reason,
perfect world, you only see Malachi Nelson late in the game against Colorado.
Yeah, well, because you don't burn his red shirt, you can play him in 4 games.
Yeah,
that should be the plan for Malachi Nelson. The only reason that I'm sort of on the fence about whether or not that's actually how it'll play out is I have not seen a single sign of true confidence that Lincoln Riley has shown in Miller Moss being his primary quarterback.
Yeah,
so that's just that's me reading between the lines too. Like, I could have that entirely wrong.
But again, if Nelson is QB2 or QB3, either or, you ideally perfectly want him to barely be on the field, with the exception of the blowouts. Yeah. Although you want more than 4 blowouts.
Yes.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah.
West Texas Mike, why has USC basketball in 10 years not played up to the athletic level of Florida Gulf Coast that one magical season? Well, they did. They went to the Elite Eight.
They went to the Elite Eight. Don't discount the Elite Eight
FGCU did not. Yeah.
Yeah, the Elite Eight run was exceptional. I will continue to say, though, that like Evan Mobley is proving in the NBA that like he is a generational talent.
Yeah.
So an Elite Eight run should have been the minimum requirement. Why wasn't that team a higher seed is my question. But I mean, again, you guys have heard me now. My standard for USC basketball is higher than the standard that I think the school is putting on and that some fans do. And that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
Come at it in different directions. But yeah, I expect more. I think it's a fair question to ask.
Tim, first of all, there's too many Tims.
We got a lot of Tims.
We've got Tim Whitman and Tim Prangley in the chat. Tim W, Tim P.
And they're talking to each other, and that's fun.
It's Tim on Tim action over here.
Yes.
But Tim Whitman says, I miss the sports arena. It was a bit of a dump, but the seats were better. I have good memories of sitting courtside with my friends in the empty games. I have to say, I agree. I miss the sports arena. I have fond memories of the sports arena, in part because in high school, at Narbonne in the drumline, we would go to all the girls' basketball games, and Narbonne's girls' basketball was elite. We're talking like national champs level elite. So we'd go to all the LA City Championship games, which were always at the sports arena. One year it was at the Forum. The time it was at the Forum, by the way, the Forum in like 2006, way more decrepit than the sports arena. Wouldn't think it, but it was. And the sports arena was awesome. I understand, way outdated, way terrible, totally a dump, but it was my dump. You know what I mean?
I feel that. I think that's a valid perspective on a sporting venue.
Yeah.
I don't really have memories of the sports arena. I know I went at least
Well,
once,
how many?
but I don't have a
You think you've
single
only been like
memory.
once?
Maybe.
Oh, you want to
And
really
I've got
crazy
like a
thought here?
weird memory. I want to say like they did an academic decathlon there once, but that doesn't make any sense though because
Who's
the
going to an academic decathlon?
me
To watch it?
no to be in
To
it.
compete? Is it
Yes.
okay? I can't decide. Does that make you nerdier or nerdy or less nerdy to watch it versus compete in it?
Hey, my favorite academic decathlon moment, memory was the first year that I competed in academic decathlon. These people who set that this was like the Catholic school's academic decathlon.
Wow.
They didn't realize that Harry Potter was as big as it was, obviously, because the books, I was the literature person, and the books
Mhm.
that they assigned
Oh,
for
you went
the
extreme
literature
nerd
category was Harry Potter.
on this. Mhm.
I didn't have to study a damn thing. I came in first place along with 13 others. I'm pretty sure there were 20 in second place and like 15 in third place.
Everybody just knew all the answers. It was too basic.
We were all obsessed with Harry Potter. We didn't need to be assigned the reading. We had been reading it over and over and over again for years. Like they had no idea what they were getting into. The
Right.
next year, they assigned this very obscure book that I don't even remember a single thing about it. And like, yeah, that sucked because then I had to actually like study and I didn't
Sure.
do well because like
So you know what's going to be on the test? That's how it works?
no, they assign you a book, like they
Huh.
assign you like reading material and then the test is about
So
the
you,
book.
outside of your normal curriculum, were taking on new reading assignments?
Yes.
I can't fathom this.
Well, I mean, there were people who were in the math track, like there were people doing extra math work. There was like a team logic section.
I mean, I could have been on your geography team. Just looking
We stayed late after school for
spinning the
decathlon
spinning the globe a
practice,
few times.
where we sat and spent an hour doing.
So this is what it was like at
problems.
Notre Dame.
No. This was in elementary school.
Elementary school.
6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Yeah.
Wait, you were in 7th grade at elementary school?
Yes. Grade school? I don't know. It's the school you're in before you go to high school.
I can't comprehend your private schoolness.
You go K through 8.
K through 8?
And then you go to high school 9 through 12.
Why is it like a 5-year-old at the same building as like a 13-year-old?
Because that's
weird.
That's what it's like in a Catholic school with 300 enrollment.
Oh boy. Anyways, as the staunch LAUSD grad, bagged milk and all, I can say that the sports arena fond in my memories.
Okay.
And my first sports arena memory, you want to guess? The Los Angeles Ice Dogs.
I was going to guess hockey.
The LA Ice Dogs
What?
Played there their inaugural year before they moved to Long Beach.
What are the Los Angeles Ice Dogs, like a second
They were
division NHL, or
they were in the leagues changed several. I think it was in the IHL, and then they went to the ECHL.
Okay.
Then they basically disbanded. Essentially, it's like a AAA is the a AAA baseball team, but hockey.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
All right. Last thing, Lau says, what position battle is the most interesting right now?
I think it's linebacker. I think it's possible that the linebacker position will not be as interesting as I think it is right now, because it's entirely possible it'll just be Mason Cobb and Shane Lee, and then that'll be it and whatever. But I think you have to look at it and think Rajon Davis, Tackett Curtis, Mason Cobb, Shane Lee, Eric Gentry when he comes back from injury. I could see any combination of those guys playing.
Sure.
But I can't tell you for certain which combination it'll be. And I think that's why that's a very interesting group.
Yeah. So we'll potentially see a little glimmer of that and see how those things are and where they stand on Saturday, 12 p.m. Pacific at the Coliseum. SC locking horns with themselves, of course. It is the spring game. It will be on the Pac-12 network as well. You can watch it there. And of course, we will be back next Monday, 5 p.m. on 5 p.m. Pacific, right here live on YouTube. You can join us on YouTube. You can also become a member over on YouTube and become the member of the Rot Squad for as little as $4.99 a month. You get to join and see monthly bonus content. Last about a week and a half ago, we put up last month's monthly bonus episode. It was super fun to put together. We've had great feedback. We also have a Discord channel that you guys can join and talk to us all week about the show, about USC football, USC whatever. Police chases, whatever's on your mind. Join us.
Tim in LA, we're going to use your question next episode.
Yes.
In the Discord, by the way.
Yeah. That's the plan.
Yes.
All right. Tim in LA, who I think is one of the Tims in the chat.
Whichever we need to clarify if it's which.
There's too many Tims. Too many Tims.
Yes.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a third Tim. It's entirely possible there's a third Tim.
Could be. No. You never know.
You never know.
All right. We will be back next week. Until then, see ya.
See ya.
See ya.